Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
So we acknowledge the traditional Aboriginal owners of this land that we meet on here, and we know that the Marangan waterhole and this specific part of Marangan and the Broken River has been a meeting point for people over tens of thousands of years for important ceremonial gatherings. We obviously come here today in the spirit of humanity, and in that sense we absolutely are opposed to all forms of racism and bigotry, including anti-Semitism. And we do express our deep human condolences to the victims of the Bondi terrorist attack, the 15 people who were murdered on that day, to their family and friends, and to our fellow Jewish citizens in their time of grief. And we are here because we value all human life and all human rights. That is why we cannot turn a blind eye. We are not turning away from the terrible suffering that we know has been inflicted on the people of Gaza, on the people of the West Bank, in Palestine over these past 2 years particularly. And we are here today as part of 28 actions across the continent happening right at this time around our similar message.
Since the ceasefire on October 10, 2025, Israeli military attacks have killed at least 529 Palestinians. 1,400 have been wounded. There have been more than 1,450 violations of the ceasefire through Israeli airstrikes, artillery fire, and direct shooting. Over 1 million people remain in urgent need of shelter.
Isaac Herzog has been guilty of inciting the genocide. And to quote Isaac Herzog, he said, "There are no innocents in Gaza." And he also stated, "It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians who are not aware and not involved." By making those statements, Isaac Herzog was giving the green light and advocating for the collective punishment of the civilians of Gaza for the actions of Hamas. A number of international agencies have investigated Isaac Herzog. In particular, there is the United Nations Independent Inquiry into the Occupied Palestinian Territories, which has found that Isaac Herzog is in fact guilty of inciting acts of genocide. The former Australian Human Rights Commissioner, Chris Sidoti, who is an expert in international human rights law, is a serving member of that United Nations inquiry. And Chris Sidoti has said on the public record in the past week that based on the findings of that inquiry, Isaac Herzog should not be given an official welcome to Australia. He should in fact be arrested by the Australian Federal Police and investigated and charged for war crimes. Isaac Herzog shares a collective responsibility for the actions of the government and the state that he leads. Unfortunately, we have learnt in the past 2 years that we can't rely on the United Nations or Western so-called liberal democratic governments to prevent these most heinous and obvious crimes against civilians. And our own Western governments, including here in Australia, are certainly guilty of complicity by not taking the strong measures necessary for Israel to face consequences for their actions. In response to this failure by our governments, we have seen in the past 2 years a genuinely mass movement of the people arise both here in Australia and globally. Here in Australia, we can be proud that we are marked out as having some of the most regular and largest street protests internationally, including the mass march across the Sydney Harbour Bridge mid-last year. This popular pressure of the kind that we are demonstrating today did pressure the Albanese Labor government to take the correct step of officially recognising the state of Palestine. However, we know that this recognition alone is insufficient. It must be backed up now by comprehensive sanctions so they cannot continue their unlawful occupation and genocide. These sanctions must include a complete embargo on all military trade of goods with Israel, and to ensure that all Australian government and non-government entities don't give any aid to the commission of these crimes. Here in Australia, that call for sanctions has been taken up by the Australian Council of Trade Unions, and it is a call that we need to continue to make, just as it was made against apartheid South Africa when we're opposing the racism of that state.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!